People oftentimes who have fleeting success or one-hit wonder success, they only have it because they were abundantly talented in something, but they couldn't manage it. Or they neglect a couple of these plates and they have success for maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but then some catastrophic thing wipes it all out. Whereas people who start to practice this sort of thing can have things wiped out and recover because they've built the virtues in order to basically take with them who they are into where they go.
Dave, we've been going through kind of I would say a litany of questions these last few weeks, which is what they are, but just really good, relevant topics for anybody in leadership, nonprofits, family life. I mean, anywhere where you have a leadership or authority position and you're influencing others, but also to some of the aspects that are relevant to the SMBs, to the people starting businesses and that sort of thing. So I do want to kind of ask you questions pertinent to a topic that you've discussed before in the past, which is the 6 spinning plates and balancing those. A key component of your philosophy in life and just in general as a leader and a CEO. Can you walk us through a little bit about balancing those 6 spinning plates, what they are and why they're important to you?
Yeah, great question. So the 6 spinning plates is an interesting thing. There are certain areas of life that if you look at people after a given period of time, if they neglect them, there's problems in their life. So I would look at it from that perspective first. So, it's kind of like if in your physical life, if somebody's like, well, I do all these things, but I just don't exercise at all. Well, what's going to eventually happen is their tendons and their muscles and their bones are going to become weaker, and they're going to end up having injury because of that, even though they're eating right. And so eating right is a super important thing. Or let's say they exercise, but they eat horribly. Well, they might even look pretty decent, but internally they're going to build visceral fat and they're going to have health issues because of that. Or let's say they do a lot of cardio. Well, okay, that's going to be good in one regard or capacity, but still, if they're doing it in only one way, there's going to be other physical deficits, and of course, diet is relevant. Or let's say they're doing all those things perfectly, but they're taking some sort of drug or abusing alcohol. So you look at it and you say, okay, there's these spinning plates within our physical life where you can go for a period of time neglecting one of these particular things, but given enough time, it's problematic. Our whole life is kind of like that. So, there are some people who are like, my finances are so important to me. I just spend all this time on my finances. And then all of a sudden what happens is their family life starts to fall apart because they neglected it. Well, I use the spinning plates analogy because if you think about like a circus performer that, has a bunch of plates spinning on separate sticks, sometimes they stack plates too, but let's say they have, 6 different plates. There are 6 plates in life that I've identified. If you neglect or you only pay attention to your family, or your finance plate, your health plate's going to fall, your family plate's going to fall, your faith plate is likely going to fall, you're not going to be much in society, your social contributions, they're going to fall. All of these are going to fall. And so you're going to have to go back and buy new plates or pick up the other ones and glue them back together and start spinning them. And by the time you do that, your financial plate is just wiped out. So the very plate that you love can be destroyed by neglecting the other plates. So what are the 6 plates? And when you say faith is one of 6 plates, the analogy falls a little bit short. In the same thing, you've heard the analogy that faith is not a file in the cabinet, it's cabinet itself that contains all the files. And that's true here too. But to use it as an example, you have your faith plates, you have your finances plate, you have your physical health plate, you have your career or vocation plate, you have your social contributions plate. Which one did I miss there? Oh my goodness. The guy left out the family. What's important to him? And anyway, so these are all the plates that really matter. Now, some people get confused and they think, okay, well, if I'm going to spin all 6 plates, and nobody's really this confused, but they get kind of close to this, where it's like, well, I'm going to divide 24 hours by 6 things, and you can't spend 4 hours in each one because there's no sleeping plate, even though it's contained within the physical health plate. And by the way, mental health is also a part of physical health. But the reason I don't just call it physical and mental health is because you will have mental health by balancing all of the rest of these plates. So like mental health is included in faith, it's included in finances, include a lot of things. There's a lot of people that are like all together, put together there, but they're so stressed about their money that their mental health is bad. So like that's why I don't deliberately have that plate. It's contained within some of the other ones. And friendships too. Friends, it's a part of family. Okay. But you can't just take all of them and spend the same amount of time on them. So it's good to stack plates and to be faithful to each plate, even if you can't give it enough time. So, for example, there might be a day that you're traveling, and you're traveling pretty extensively, and you can't work out like you normally would have, and you're away from your family. So how do you manage that? Or you're required to be in meetings that are pretty excessive over a period of time where, according to where you are in life, on this particular day, you can't step out and pray the rosary. Or you normally go to daily mass, but you have to be in this meeting. By and large, I find that if you want to go to mass, God does help many of us make it happen. Now, there are some people who live in a circumstance where they're 2 hours away from the church and it can't, or they live in a different country. But I wouldn't just use that as a default, I can't because. I would ask yourself, is there a way to make this happen? And there is oftentimes, even though for others there is not. And that is just the way it is. And God will provide that grace in a different way. But let's say this is a particular day that you can't go to mass and you can't be with your family and you can't work out. There are other things you can do. You can conduct yourself as a good Christian in the meeting, prayerfully doing what you do by inviting God into it. That's a part of it. It's offering up this day. You are going to eat that day, even if you're not going to work out. Well, what are you choosing to eat that day? Is it going to be good for you? Are you going to be ahead or behind because of that? In that meeting, you can conduct yourself as a faithful husband according to who else is there or not there. So there are different ways that we do this because there's an intake and an exertion in each one of these for the most part. So somebody might say, well, on that day too, it's not like I could buy a stock or anything on the financial plate. No, but you could spend or not spend that day. You go to lunch with everybody. What are you choosing to order or not order? So, on both of these, we look at it. We consume when it comes to spending, and we invest, or we earn and we invest. We eat and we exercise, okay? We conduct ourselves in a respectful manner according to what it means to be married or single or father or not when we're with or without our family. And then when we're with our family, we invest into our family this particular way. So when you examine all of these things, you need to give each one of them attention on a daily basis. One of the best ways to do this is to stack the plates. Now, I do want to cover this. I've had people say, well, Dave, who do you think you are to come up with these 6 priorities that we have? Because for me, music is really important, and that's not a plate. Or golf is really important, and that's not a plate. First of all, I'm nobody. Okay, so let's just begin with that. I have observed highly successful people over the years who have long-term success. I call them giants now. In one of my original books, I used to call them legacy achievers. They build a legacy. But I call them giants. And they've shown me this. They're not one-hit wonders. They're people who have long-term sustained success, even in the midst of crisis. And that's a major thing. People oftentimes who have fleeting success or one-hit wonder success, they only have it because they were abundantly talented in something, but they couldn't manage it. Or they neglect a couple of these plates and they have success for maybe 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, but then some catastrophic thing wipes it all out. Whereas people who start to practice this sort of thing can have things wiped out and recover because they've built the virtues in order to basically take with them who they are into where they go. And that is something that matters. But these are priorities, not interests. We may have an interest in our family, an interest in our work, an interest in finance, an interest in physical health, but interest things like, a wine connoisseur or a classic car person, or a pickleball or golf or whatever it is. Those are great. They're not separate, but the reason that I don't make them a plate is because if you're not a pro golfer, okay, and golf is so important to you that it becomes a plate, humans can only spin 6 plates. And if you add a 7th plate, 1 or 2 or several of the other ones are going to wobble and fall. And the very golf plate that you like so much, that's going away. So instead, why don't you golf? And by the way, this is just a silly example, okay, just for the sake of it. Why don't you golf with a couple of family members and your financial advisor? Don't take a cart so you can walk. Okay, now you've got your finances going, you've got your family going, you've got your physical health going. Say a prayer before every one of the shots that you take, okay? Donate the money to a charity and be a good part of society. While you do that, what am I missing in there?
Continuing education.
Oh, and continue education. Don't know quite how to work that
while
one in.
Listening to a podcast
while listening to a podcast on how to grow your business, right? Okay, so if you could do all of that, and somehow you'd probably be neglecting one of the plates in the midst of all of that craziness. But the point is, there are many different ways that you can do more than one plate at one time. And it's not even multitasking. No one considered multitasking to golf with their friend or their family member. That's not multitasking. It's just getting good exercise in while you're doing a hobby and you're spending time with your family. That's an awesome thing. And so there's a lot of ways that we can do these things and have them work out.
Yeah, I love that. It's a not simplified, but just very direct approach at how to tackle all areas of your life in a very ordered way, which I love. And it's holistic, right? There are a lot of voices out there that say focus on this and this and this. Work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, I know one famous influencer that proposes that, which to a certain degree, maybe there's a need for that at a season of life. But even then, it's missing the other aspects of life, right? And to your point, once some of those plates fall, it's hard to get them back. Mm-hmm. Dave, I did want to touch on. There's a lot of people in influential positions that touch on or talk about corporate responsibility and ethical leadership. What's your take on that? How do you approach ethical leadership? Owning the businesses that you own, what is the appropriate way to have corporate responsibility? I'd love to have you expound on that.
Yeah. Okay, I love this topic because it's so misused. There's a reality to it, but there's some misuse of it. In fact, it's one of the reasons that the whole woke DEI thing is in there right now. DEI thing is in there. It's this our corporate responsibility to be a good citizen, therefore advocate for all these evil things. No, knock it off. The first thing that I would say is, okay, well, how does that really play out? The way that it plays out is mostly through justice, okay? So if you sell a product that is a bad product and you overcharge for it and you rip people off, that's not just. It's unfair. Well, you're certainly a bad citizen. You're not really employing people with a lot of stability because something's going to, hit the fan sooner or later. It's not fair to the families that are employed. It's not fair to the neighborhoods that are supported through the fact that the company is doing misleading or dishonest things. It's not good for the people who are buying the products. Might be good for some lawyers, but bad for the other ones. So that has nothing to do with your human resources department and advocating for certain things. Now, the interesting thing, too, is that some people say, well, it's a pro-life company. How? And I'm, by the way, I'm totally pro-life and vote pro-life and am like all about all of that. There's no but, no reservation on that. There's a question, though. Can a company be pro-life? I don't think it can. The individual people within the company can be pro-life, and what they do with their resources can be put behind pro-life things. The company itself could donate to pro-life causes. That is also very true. But any individual person in that organization at any time could have an opposing view that they're hiding and supporting something that runs counter to a pro-life mission. And it's the same thing with companies on the reverse side. Well, I won't buy from that company because they gave to this bad thing. Well, yes, but let's say the company doesn't. Let's say the company is totally neutral on these issues. The individual people in that organization are going to behave certain ways. And this is where this gets a little bit complex. Now, I'm not saying having a company where people would sign some sort of document saying that they would use their resources only for all sorts of good causes, such as a pro-life activity, and the company would give, would be like some sort of a bad thing to set up. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm also saying that that's not really where the justices or the injustices come into play in our world. The reason that they come into play is because there's an unjust thing that takes place in hiring, where you discriminate against a person. That's not just. Reverse discrimination. That's not just. Where you make a mistake yourself, but you scapegoat an employee, so you fire the employee. That's not just. That you work people ridiculously long hours for low pay while there's high profits for the organization and they can't meet a particular standard of living. That's also not fair. But there is a time where you have high school employees that are working at the counter at a fast food restaurant. That is a job that is not meant to sustain and take care of a family. It is not just to the company to force the company to pay these kids a level that you would pay people to support a lifestyle when that's not the intention of the job in the first place. And people think, oh, that is just. Well, no, it's not. And here's how you see this happen all the time. Like these minimum wage laws. You talk about being a good or a bad citizen. You have some people that just immediately take the side of the person, the employee. And they say, we need to raise minimum wage to $20 an hour because you can't have a livable wage without that. Here's how that plays out. You have a guy who, or a woman, who wants to pay for their kids' college, to put them in a really good Catholic school, let's say, or private education. They're not making enough money. So they open a cafe. And in that cafe, they're barely eking by a $50,000 profit. They're working an extra 20 hours on the evenings and weekends to try to make that additional profit. They, with their other job, get taxed because of this combined 30%. So they only keep $35,000 of the $50,000 that they're earning. And it requires for their 4 kids to go to college all of that money. A law comes by and they have to jack their minimum wage up twice. They go, if they actually did that, they would now not be earning $50,000 a year. They would be losing $20,000 a year. And their average employee would be earning $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 more. Does a high school kid who doesn't have these responsibilities, that took no risk, deserve to make $30,000 a year at the cost of a guy who's got 3 or 4 kids losing $20,000 to pay for that? No, that's not justice. But when people that don't know anything about what they're talking about start getting involved in this sort of thing, and by the way, those are the largest employees in the world, or in the United States of America, are these small businesses like that out there, and you want to fire these shots at them as though these people are running around being rich all day with their small business. They're not. And now you know what happens? That guy, he doesn't quit the rest of his job and work there full time because he would have no life at all, and he still wouldn't be earning that much. He closes it. And now what happens? He doesn't have the money. The kids don't go to the college. The college doesn't get the money because of that. And all the employees that had their job that they actually really liked, working 15 hours a week, doing whatever, it all goes away. Why? Because some self-righteous person that doesn't know anything about justice started screaming good citizenship and corporate responsibility and aiming it at completely the wrong target. So we have to look at these things and we have to ask ourselves. Like, here's another one. I saw something with the Olympics recently, and it shows, look at the injustice in the Olympics. The basketball team earns, like, I think it was like $4.7 billion or something, like, collectively in income. But the lower 1/3 of all the athletes earns $15,000 a year. That's stark. that's a pretty big deal. But those things don't have anything to do with each other at all. They're so completely unrelated. It's akin to, Nico, you need to finish your plate, which you didn't even serve up for yourself, but your, aunt served up with all the extra calories and sugar that you can't possibly eat that will get you sick. You need to finish this meal because there are people starving in Africa. There's a couple of questions that I have to ask here on this. First of all, how are they going to be fed if I eat this? Okay. Now, if you went and, there's a certain level of flexibility in here to satisfy your aunt and to demonstrate your love back. I'm not suggesting that you wouldn't maybe discomfort yourself to a mild degree there, right? But if this is especially a habitual type of thing in a regular meal or whatever it is, how does you, having a cardiac arrest and growing obese, help people in Africa? The problem happens to be, let's serve a smaller portion. Now, at the same time, if you went and loaded your whole thing up and your parents are saying, don't take more than you can eat, and they're going to teach you a lesson, yeah, there's a little bit of a difference there. But there are things that people do that just don't apply. They don't correlate. And so what they're trying to do is exact a justice in a way that provides for further injustice. And what's the one virtue that they lack when they do this? Prudence, desiring what is good. So when you talk about corporate responsibility, there's a lot of things relative to it. There are many. I would give you one would be the owners and the people who produce and build the company, that they have a reasonable wage according to what things, and there's not usury with their employees. That's a real thing. But as long as that is met for the employees, and it is fair, and there's an opportunity to advance, and there's abundant wealth after that, it doesn't mean they have to distribute it to everybody else who didn't take the risk, who does not own it. Any more than if you have a mortgage on your home and you pay your home off and your home happens to be in a great real estate market and it's worth 3 times it was when you first bought it, you don't have a responsibility to give your equity to the kids because they live there. They didn't take the risk. You're providing for them. They get all sorts of benefits in the home, and they should actually be helping as good citizens. So there's to give something to people that didn't merit it is not justice for them, but it's injustice of the person you took it away from. Now, here's where the injustice comes in for that person where they're a bad citizen. What are you doing with that money once you have it? Okay? Are you not, now according to your own discretionary decision, okay, not being forced, not the government taking it and then putting it into their, but are you giving it to the church? I mean, really, are you providing the justice that is there according to God, according to your neighbor? Now, ironically, you hear me saying, no, you don't give it to that frontline employee who's being paid a fair wage that enjoys their job just because you have it. But your neighbor that's sick and widowed, that can't do anything, that you drive past every day, when you've got that extra money, are you helping them? That's where the justice comes in. And while it's not directly related to the corporation, it's related to the bounty that we have from a corporation. But the primary place that justice comes in is the value and the quality of the products that you're providing and the service that you're providing. Is it frivolous and wasteful? In other words, is it adult entertainment that provides no value or good no matter what? Is it a ripoff? People are buying something they don't get use or value out of. Now, some people would equate that to cheap things versus not cheap things. I would not. If you go to the dollar store and you're like, wow, this really cheap item at the dollar store, I buy it all the time, and it's only $1, and you know what? It's actually not as good as this product here. But what happens is I buy this, and sure, I have to replace it weekly, but I looked at buying the good one, and the good one would last me 3 weeks, but it costs 4 times more. I'd rather buy the not so good one for less money because it fits my need. Well, that's great, because the problem with, see, it's a very Catholic thing to build high quality, good things. But what if you're a brand new artisan and you didn't build something that's really awesome or high quality, but it's as good as you could have built it. And in earnest, you built it that way. And instead of selling it for $2,000, which is what you would have sold it for if it was really high quality to a particular person that can afford $2,000, you sell it for $200 to somebody who recognizes this is not that good, but I happen to need one, and I can get one for $200. Okay, maybe someday I can afford a better one, and then I'll buy the better one. But for now, this actually meets my need. So I can either not have one or have a lesser quality one for $200. This is a super important concept because, see, a lot of times Catholics get confused and they start preaching in a way that can be very harmful. They say things like, anybody who buys a Rolls Royce is sinning. Okay? And then they say, that's not a good product, and you need to be like a great Catholic and build a quality product. Okay, how do we reconcile the two? Because a Rolls Royce is a really good product. And I'm telling you what, if you've been in one, it glorifies God if you want, like, wow, that these materials that God created on earth that we can manipulate and then move from 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds with I don't own a Rolls Royce, by the way. Okay, that we can move in 3.5 seconds from 0 to 60 and just look at it and just be like amazed by it. Wow. None of that is sinful. It's a glorification of God. You know what's the problem? The problem is a guy who's making $100,000 a year that can't pay his bills or take care of his family, but his ego gets him to buy a Rolls Royce. But the guy that's making $3 million a year or is a billionaire that has a couple of Rolls Royces, and by the way, simultaneously gave twice as much money to charities than he did on his Rolls Royces, okay. I can tell you the people who are building the Rolls Royces and cleaning the Rolls Royce facility are really glad that he's actually buying the product, and the designer who said, I want to glorify, if he did, I want to glorify God by creating something that's absolutely beautiful and amazing, that happens too. So that's why the prudential aspect of these sorts of things and detachment and where we are in life matters when we look at these circumstances.
Yeah, that's a great insight there, Dave, on ethical leadership and corporate responsibility. It's funny because while we're recording here, we're actually in the midst of the tail end of this tropical storm that we got hit with. It's even without the tropical storm here in Florida, you never know what the weather's going to be like. You'll walk outside, get ready to hit the beach, and next thing you know, there's a thunderstorm and a tornado warning. So it's just kind of the nature of being here in Florida. Dave, I did want to move into a different topic here, and just understanding and implementing kind of the current landscape of things. What's your take on applying or implementing AI in business? And moreover, given the fact that a lot of these small businesses are being pushed to pay these high wages, I mean, there's a chance that they may want to just hire robots and AI in the future. What's your take on ethically maybe implementing AI?
I mean, there are ethical questions that would come up. They would be a little bit more particular. I would start with a practical one. Somebody showed me the other day a search online of me that it showed in like a wiki net worth thing or something like that, a net worth that's just radically different than what mine is, but also that I was born in Ohio with a completely different work history. Then I moved to LA, completely different work history, all these different things about me that had literally nothing to do with me, but enough things about me that were actually my life and my actual picture on there. And you could tell that nobody intentionally just wrote this article about me, but it was an AI generated thing that was grabbing information that was just completely not real. There was an accident recently in the area that we're in here too, where an AI generated news story said that 4 teenagers were killed in the accident, when in reality nobody was killed. There was a serious injury, but bad data and misreporting is a problem with it. How it is used is not always by way of content like that. There's another practical side, which is the intellectual property side. Who owns what when something happens? So what can you generate and then profit from versus what can you just generate for end use? And so there's that. There's another practicality to it. For example, people are going to use it for interviewing. They are now already, because it can measure like word patterns, and it can even identify facial expressions to determine what your temperament might be without having to take a test, and whether or not you might be a good fit for something. It can be used at least to a mild degree to determine whether or not a person is lying or not lying, but AI also lies. So, there's a whole lot around it right now. Here's my take. First of all, I use AI in my businesses right now. It's used for a lot of content generation for a lot of different things. You, of course, will use it, to if we're doing an edit and I'm not around and I misspoke on something, an AI generated voice will actually say something for me. There's a lot of different things that it can be used for that are very useful right now. It can be useful for conducting presentations, for summarizing issues, just asking, whatever random pick of your favorite AI program to give you information on something. It's actually really, really effective for things like that. I mean, even like some legal advice, like how do I incorporate? Boom, all these answers are fantastically there in a more concise manner than just trying to do a Google search too. So it has uses. But here's the thing that I would say. We are in an influx. There is a hyper excitement about AI. We're seeing in the market right now. One of the reasons the market is just, at the moment that we're recording this, by the way, because we're going to put this out over the weekend. In fact, we're recording a couple of shows today, so I'm not exactly sure which one we're putting this. But at the moment we're recording this, the Dow is down on Friday 800 points, and it's down currently another 1,000 points. And there's a lot of speculation as to why this is happening. One of the reasons is that when the Dow and the NASDAQ, by the way, just the markets, in fact, Bitcoin, okay, the markets like stability. So if they would think that like the current president would have remained in office, even if that president's not great for or against the economy, knowledge of what the circumstance is friendly to it. When it looked like Trump was going to just bowl things over, there was knowledge of that. Some people would argue that the economy itself would be better under the Trump administration, and that's not an argument I can or will make at all on relevant radio. Though people listen to me, they know what I would think. I would say that what it is, it's stability. The market knows stability, and it wants stability. Now, all of a sudden, with Kamala Harris in there and the polls being so close, they don't know what's going to happen. And because they don't know, the market's coming down. But there's another huge reason it's coming down. And it's because there was a super hyper enthusiasm for AI, and now nobody really knows how it's going to actually be used. It revealed for itself certain limitations that they thought weren't going to be there, and at the same time, certain levels of accelerated creepiness, which are now dangerous. And because of that, the government's getting a little bit more involved, and at least some of the users of this are saying we need to take more of a regulated approach to how we're going to release these programs and have people actually affected by it. So, well, there's not a lot of regulation that's actually taking place now. There's speculation that people who establish certain AI programs could be accountable for what takes place in them. So there's a little bit of pullback and hesitation. Now, by the way, this is so fluid and so fast moving that from day to day, anything can change under the realm of this. But what does that mean? It's uncertainty. So that uncertainty is pulling things down there too. I think we're in a place where you are wise, and you've heard me say this before, Nico, that I don't think AI is a competitive advantage. And I believe that even more right now. I believe that if you don't use AI, you're just going to be left behind. And the analogy that I use is like nobody thinks of a car or a computer as a strategic advantage. Every company now has a computer, cell phones, cars. Okay, they're just standard business tools that pretty much everybody has access to, and using them as a strategic advantage is a silly idea. You just have a strategic disadvantage to not have them because they're a commodity. AI will be like that and is even becoming like that right now. So if you want to keep up with everybody else, you need to use AI. But I think we're in a pause moment right here, which is to say, let me just hold on a little bit and to see what develops a little bit further to see how much further we're going to use this. Now, again, depending on what industry you're in, content creation, there's really not holding back. I mean, people in content creation and artists are using it at a pretty high level, and it gets better and faster and more usable. Again, there's the intellectual property issues associated with that sort of thing. But at the same time, too, it's just like, it's full on, it's in, and people just can't wait for the next iteration of things. But and by the way, this is also true for a lot of like medical research that's taking place, because it can do what researchers would have done in laboratories over a period of time in a much more condensed fashion by running formulas that are unbelievable. And this is also a great way to use it. But then it runs like financial speculation, and we use it in weather patterns all the time. And those are, at least anecdotally in my experience, getting more accurate. Okay. So there's a lot of ways that it's being used, but there's also a little bit of pause. I would say that AI is really no different on a moral level than anything else we use. Like the internet itself. You can't condemn the internet because it does an enormous amount of good, but there's no doubt about it. It can be used for a tremendous amount of evil too. So we just have to look at it that way.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of the uncertainty component that you were mentioning here, it's just there is a lot of uncertainty around it. So a lot of people speculate and have very strong opinions without necessarily either using or giving it time. But that's a good point, Dave. Shifting gears here, more into the less into the AI, more into the real world kind of environment, so to speak. For someone who is looking to either make business connections or perhaps even climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, what are the more effective ways to network and create relationships without necessarily seeming like you're just trying to extract information or get information or what have you, but just genuinely wanting to network for the sake of something good for you and for the other person?
Yeah. So networking is very important and very valuable, but I think the people who have built the greatest networks on planet Earth are people who let them grow organically. So there's a lot of like information on how to network, and it's basically how to meet and hobnob with all sorts of people and rub shoulders and join networking groups. One of the things about networking groups is that it is my experience that 95% of the people who go to a networking group go there so everybody else can make them wealthy or rich or famous. They don't go to contribute. Now, there are some companies and networking groups that do a really good job, and they say givers get, so they have all sorts of like required contributions that people have to make, and I think those are good things too. But for the most part, people go to things to get something. I think if you build a life of value and you do things of value and you meet certain people sometimes because you need to lean on them, and that's a good thing, then good things happen. I know that for me, I have quite a network right now. And it's amazing how many people that I can call if I need something, or that will call me because they need something. But a lot of it is transactional. And that is like, if I didn't have something that I could give them, they would be very much less willing to just call me and help me out. And then there are other people that the friendship is so strong that it's not transactional. But I just have noticed that the more that I've contributed to the world, the more value that I bring, the bigger my network becomes. And so, sure, be in the right place at the right time, interact with the right people. It's one of the reasons people like to go to Ivy League schools is, everybody knows, for gosh sakes, half the things you literally destroy your brain learning, but you have this great network of people that take care of you when you graduate, and that's something that can be quite valuable. And it is because you deliberately went to a particular place where there would be a network involved. And so you kind of start with the networking. But even those people that graduate from Harvard or whatever, if they don't have anything to add or contribute, that network becomes pretty thin pretty soon. People like to take a chance on somebody, saying, if I'm going to open a door for you, I'm going to look good because I opened that door for you. And again, that's kind of transactional. There are some people that get to a place in life that they don't really care how they look, and they don't even mind opening the door anonymously. But at the same point, I think that we have to look at this, in summary, two different ways. Yes, not a bad idea to go to the places. And there's a classic thing, it's not what you know, it's who you know. There's some reality to that, and you can open up doors and do some big things because of that. But I think the best way to build a network is to provide a life of value, to provide something to share with others until people are interested enough in it that they themselves want the exchange with you.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because the moment I stopped networking is the moment that my network organically grew. And the more I got out of it, because it wasn't transactional. It was like, hey, I'm genuinely interested in learning more about you, and I care for what you do. And I just, not a curiosity, but a studiosity, as you would say, about all the different things that you bring to the table. And many times in my life, professionally and personally, not that I've wanted or sought for a handout, but there were people who just opened doors that wouldn't have otherwise been opened, and I'm very grateful for those people. It's a key thing to highlight. Dave, this is kind of a last question here. We're running towards the tail end of the segment. I know we've talked about negotiation and persuasion. What are some what's one effective communication skill, for the sake of time, for leaders that they can adopt today?
I would say that, for me, you've heard me say this before, empathy is my highest level for effective communication. You can say everything that you want to say in the most articulate fashion, but if the other person doesn't care about it or doesn't meet their need, it really doesn't matter. You can be unbelievably inarticulate with a person who has an emotional need, but meet their emotional need, and you've been quite effective with them. Sometimes people have a super high intellectual need, and in order to be effective and influential and communicate with them, you need to be able to articulate something. But if there's some blockage, it won't matter. I didn't even hear what he said because I don't like him. So I think that when we're empathetic, all of what we know can be communicated. All of what we feel can be communicated. If we're not empathetic, then it doesn't matter how much we know. There's a saying for that, right? I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And the reason people use that saying is because it's true. And so I think that really kind of the hidden superpower is empathy. And empathy is understood and known by saying, if I were that person, see, there's three different types of ways that people say this. You've heard me say this, but if I were you, is advice that people give. Most people give if I were you advice pretty poorly. They think literally if I were you, I would do this. But that means that if I were you, like my knowledge, my skill, my experience, and I were in your situation, this is what I would do. But you aren't me. You don't have all of those things. So, I would be like, well, Nico, I would just, jump in the next airplane you see and fly it. Okay, well, you're not a pilot, so that would be a problem. Okay? You're a talented musician. If you said, well, if I were you, I would just write a song for her. Okay, well, that would really be putrid if I did that, and she wouldn't like it. So so the next way to give if I were you advice would be to say, if I were literally you, based on everything I know about you and what you know and your talents and your strengths and your weaknesses, this is how I would act. That's actually the best position to take in empathy. Most people either ignore it, or when they're talking to somebody else, they do the first form of if I were you. And you know what? I like to be talked to directly. And I'm talking to him directly because I like when people talk to me directly. But he doesn't like being talked to directly. So you're totally missing it with him. So you need to kind of like move into the position or place that person is in order for it to work more effectively.
I love that, Dave. And, it's funny because one of the more viral post, so to speak, here, and it's funny to say that about LinkedIn, was the post that you had made on empathy and leadership, and how all these leadership gurus kind of just poo-pooed it, so to speak, even though that's when you ask an actual leader, that's probably the most effective way to actually influence and motivate their employees and their team.
And by the way, there were many people who agreed with the post, and the vast majority did. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But what was it? The arrogance and certitude of the people who did not like the idea of empathy, and the total misunderstanding of what empathy was amazing to me. It was like, if you have empathy in the workplace, you can't be a good leader because you might have to close divisions or fire people, and you would never be able to do that if you had empathy. That is just so not true. The greatest leaders on planet Earth who have super high levels of empathy still close divisions and fire people. It's just that they do it First of all, if they can avoid it, they avoid it. But if they have to do it, they do it with the consideration of the people who are going to be impacted by it in order to reduce the amount of impact that is there for them when it takes place, as opposed to just blatantly disregarding the fact that there are humans involved. They try to say, how can I look at the circumstance as a whole?
Yeah, that's good. That's good, Dave. Well, I think that's a good way to wrap up this episode of the Dave Duran Show. We've covered everything from ethical leadership and corporate responsibility to even AI, effective communication, and the 6 spinning plates. And by the way, Dave, I know you talk a little bit about the 6 spinning plates on the programs, but you have a book coming out, Leading Giants, here in 2025. And do you expound upon the 6 spinning plates there? I think you made a book on that.
I make a brief reference to it, but I move more into the core of what it means to be a giant, leading giants to maximize influence. In other words, if you want to lead small people to do small things in a minimally influential way, this is not your book. If you want to lead great people to do big things in a maximum way, this is your book.
I love that. Well, be on the lookout for that book coming in 2025. And I think it's on pre-order right now.
I think you can get it on Prime right now, or Amazon.
Cool. Awesome. Love it. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us for this last hour here at Relevant Radio on the Dave Duran Show. Podcast version of this episode will be available 1 hour after airing. We're here with you all every Saturday. And with that said, thanks so much for joining us here on Relevant Radio. We'll see you all next week. God bless.